We've been in Maker here for 3 nights. The roof's all down, the clamps are done up, we're nearly ready to roll, but before we do that I thought I'd let you know how we got on off-grid. So I've been keeping a close eye on the battery indicator down here. Let me show you that. We've only got a really simple state of charge indicator, but the charge doesn't seem to have moved at all, which is really good. So this is a 4 LED scale, 1 red, 2 amber and 1 green, and you press the button to get an idea of how charged you are. I've got a voltmeter with us in case we want a more accurate reading about what's going on. And for our AGM leisure battery, 13 volts is considered fully charged, 12.05 as 50% state of charge, and 11.95 volts as 40% state of charge. And then you're starting to get into dangerous territory, as you could permanently damage your battery. There are lithium-based batteries which can be drained down much more than that without damaging them, but for the type of batteries that are commonly used at the moment in the UK and continental Europe, you don't want to deplete them any more than 50%. So anyway, back to how we've got on this time. This isn't our first time off-grid. We've done quite a few 1- and 2-nighter breaks, but this is the longest time we've been off-grid. As you'll know from our previous video, we're in Cornwall, and my friend and her 2 boys are staying down in a little holiday cottage in the village, and me and my 2 boys are up here on the hill at Maker camping. So this means that we've mainly been hanging out down in the village and just using the battery for a little bit of lighting at night, and to run the water pump and the piezo ignition on the hob for that all important cup of tea in the morning, and to charge the phones and camera batteries and so on. Incidentally, I've got my laptop with me, and it's a Surface Pro, and one of the great upsides of that, apart from the fact it's absolutely tiny and super portable, is that it can run directly off of a 12-volt socket. But before I show you that cable, let me just mention these things. These are brilliant. So these are USB leads which have 3 different connectors on the end. A USB-C, Lightning for Apple devices, and a micro USB. And I've got various different colours of these, 1 different colour for each person. So whichever one is lost, we know who it belongs to. And these are great because it means you don't have to carry millions of different cables around for all the different devices we've got. And then this is the 12-volt power supply cable for the Surface laptop. Just a little extra cable, but terribly handy. It's not the most powerful thing in the world, but it does the job perfectly well. Fast forward a bit and we've got home, and it suddenly occurs to me that not everybody might know how to run their systems on gas, so let me just show you how that's done. Everybody else has been doing this for years. Skip forward please. So first make sure that the gas bottle valve is open. This should always be closed for travel, of course, unless you've got a motorhome and one of those clever crash sensor auto off valve thingies, because of course it can get very chilly in the back of a huge motorhome with only the cab heating on in the depths of winter. Anyway, valve open, then make sure your regulator is open. On this regulator it's easy to work out which way the yellow tap needs to be pointing, because it needs to be vertical in line with the vertical gas pipe that goes into the caravan from the bottles themselves. And then go inside and turn on the appliance isolation taps, so the arrow in the direction of the gas flow here. Then you can light your hob or your fridge. For this particular fridge you light it like this, so turn the cooling indicator, which isn't a proper thermostat by the way, turn it to max and press it in to allow the gas to flow. If you don't have a horde of kids running around, you might actually be able to hear the gas flowing and the piezo clicking. Then hold this ignite button down and the piezo sparks. Hopefully you can just hear the clicking, and at some point, hopefully quite soon, it ignites the gas. Keep an eye on the indicator here, and as soon as the green moves you know it's lit. So hands off the controls. Because this dial here is controlling flow rather than is a proper thermostat, your fridge will actually cool faster if you leave it on max, but it's also quite likely to then freeze your cucumbers. Yes, that has happened to us quite a lot. So if you're likely to forget, then best to turn it down to a more reasonable setting now rather than later. As long as your food is already chilled, this should be fine. And if your tow car has proper electrics and you've remembered to set the fridge to the battery setting before you set off, then your stuff will be perfectly cold still. So just a little factoid here. Do not be fooled by this battery symbol. It does not mean that your fridge will run off the caravan's battery. There are two types of fridges usually fitted in leisure vehicles: compressor fridges, which work in the same sort of way as your home fridge, and absorption fridges. And this is an absorption fridge. At some point in the future I'll try and do a sort of fridge science special, if you like. But for now, all we need to know is that this fridge runs properly on 240 mains electricity or gas, or the battery, but only when you're towing, because it's running off the car, not the caravan battery. Anyway, I'm digressing again. So that was how to light your fridge. The only issue you might run into, assuming everything's working properly, is that sometimes it takes quite a long time for the gas to flow through from the bottle, through the regulator, through all the pipe work into the fridge boiler itself, where you're trying to light the spark. That can happen, particularly if it's been quite a long time since you've run the fridge on gas. And that happens quite a lot in this caravan, even though it's quite a short distance between the bottles and the burner for the fridge itself. And we can quite often get around that by encouraging the gas to flow through into the hobs themselves and getting a flame lit there, which quite often pulls the gas into the system itself and makes it much easier to light the fridge. So here you can see everything's been off for a while because we've been travelling, and it's still quite difficult to get the gas to flow through, but at least if you're trying to light it in the hobs, it's much easier to hear whether the gas is flowing or not, so you can be absolutely certain that you've got all your taps pointing in the correct direction. The piezo's firing, but it's not picking up, so we always carry a lighter as a spare anyway, and therefore we can put a flame to any gas that comes through at all. So by lighting these and getting the gas moving, makes it easier to get the gas moving into the fridge as well. Now is of course the perfect moment to point out that you should have a carbon monoxide detector. All burning produces carbon dioxide, but if it's even slightly inefficient, you start to get monoxide as well, and that's hugely poisonous and very dangerous, so you must have a detector. And it must be switched on and the batteries must be working. So please do fit one. Also make sure you've got a decent amount of ventilation going on while you're cooking inside. Cooking is pretty obvious, and the only stumbling block we had was how to do decent toast, as fried or eggy bread every day are just extravagances too far. And after a bit of research we came across this little device, which I have to say is absolutely brilliant. So now we can have proper, albeit a bit spotty, toast wherever we go. Hooray! Because we've done these little 1 or 2 night off-grid breaks before, I wasn't at all worried about our battery lasting out, but just in case I brought along this tiny solar panel we happen to have hanging around in the house. Now it's only tiny, something like 20 watts, but as it was only 3 nights and we were mainly with friends rather than totally alone, there was no way I was going to go to the expense or the hassle of fitting a decent 100 or 150 watt panel. Also, I didn't want to install it on the van, and I could use the A-frame bike rack to have it angled at a good angle. So here's how I wired it up. There's a pretty long cable that comes out of the panel, so the cable is just about long enough to have the panel on the bike rack at the front, and then have the cable come in through the van window. It fits fine when it's on the ventilation setting. Then connect to the charge controller. This one isn't waterproof, so it had to go inside. Plus there's actually less power loss through a voltage drop when you're at a higher voltage than a lower one. That's why the national grid transmits at 400,000 volts. Sorry, digressing again. Hence, as the panel generates at 21 volts and the charge controller then steps that down to, I'd guess, about 14-ish volts to charge the battery, the general approach is to keep the cable between the charge controller and the battery as short as possible. But to do that here would have meant changing the cable or extending it, so it's just not worth it for my purposes this time. So it's quite obvious how to connect the panel to the charge controller. It's all nicely labelled. quite obvious how to connect the charge controller to the battery. I'm going to install crocodile clips to make this totally removable. And there we go, one emergency trickle charging super mobile solar panel. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's random waffles through off-grid land. Do give it a go, it really opens up some super campsites that you might not have otherwise visited.
Okay, that's us done, so we're going to hit the road. We've got on absolutely fine for the 3 nights we've been off grid. We've got through a little bit of gas running the fridge all the time and a little bit of cooking. We've used hardly any power. I mean, we've been down in the village most of the time and we don't have a TV, but we've done absolutely fine. We've been using the lights, no problem at all. So thanks for tuning in. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you want to follow along with our adventures, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.